Why are they fighting, of all places, Brian Campbell, in Saudi Arabia?
This is so, I want to use the word sad, because it's so blatant why they're doing this. Why does anybody go? Why did WWE recently sign that 10-year deal with Saudi Arabia, despite political concerns and sort of culture contrasts that sort of contradict the things that WWE's
The
trying
guy
to put
who runs
forward.
the country murdered a Washington Post journalist.
Not just that, the idea that women can't compete on those shows when WWE's in the midst of this female revolution. So it just makes you look bad because you're doing it for the money. This seems to be the case right now. And this is a major fail for seemingly everyone involved. Here's why. Why is this a fail for DAZN? What's DAZN trying to do right now? Trying to splash the market to get subscriptions, to get people, to further put the image in your head that they're killing the pay-per-view business, that you shouldn't have to pay $70, $80 for a fight. You should pay your monthly $9.99, whatever you're paying, and that's fine, and you should get it. DAZN certainly thought the second half of this year would give them Wilder Joshua, which obviously didn't happen, but at the very least, Triple G Canelo 3, which is now not happening, but at the very least, Joshua Ruiz 2, which is still happening, but what would that be? That's their last tentpole thing to grab onto to get people to have to see it and to have to subscribe. And what are they doing? Eddie Hearn, Matchroom Sport, the promoter of Joshua, signed this deal to get all the money, but they're putting it on in the afternoon, head-to-head with the SEC championship game, in a really inopportune time when, if you want to draw attention to a fight, especially a fight of this magnitude, you have two options here of what they should have done. Number one, go back to the U.S. First one was in Madison Square Garden. Was a big deal. How about going to Cowboy Stadium? How about pumping that stadium full of Mexican-American fans to back the first Mexican heavyweight champion, Andy Ruiz, and creating a spectacle, put it on at traditional times, 11 Eastern on Saturday night, that people can watch it in this country. Or go to England, where Anthony Joshua regularly fights in front of 80 and 90,000 people in soccer stadiums, and give him the comfort, the benefit of the doubt. You could argue this would be one of the biggest fights, if not the biggest, in English boxing history. And they take boxing very serious. Carl Froch against George Groves in the States, decent series of two fights, not that big a deal. In England, 80,000 sellouts at Wembley Stadium, a giant ordeal. This fight would have been massive, and we're at a point right now for AJ as a brand, as a guy who was the face of the heavyweight division, the future face of boxing. He not only lost that fight, but if you hear the whispers, you hear the reports coming out, he was knocked out in sparring a couple weeks before. Maybe shouldn't have been medically cleared. They push forward with the fight anyway. He goes in there, not in the right head, gets knocked out again. I don't know if you saw afterwards, his dad was basically attacking Eddie Hearn after the fight. Wouldn't you want that back in England with 90,000 people supporting him to rebuild him back up, build up his image, build up his ego, get him back there and get him that victory? Now we're going to Saudi Arabia in a 12,000 seat outdoor stadium.
Not even. I think Mike Coppinger reported 7,000.
So the promoter can cash in, and we're going to put it on a completely inopportune time in the afternoon up against serious competition for American sports. What the hell's going on here? Like, this is now taking an event with how hot heavyweight boxing is right now and making it a crossover thing you had to see. That first fight got to people because of the image of a fat man knocking out the muscled heavyweight champion of the world. It got to people. It crossed over. Now you're basically kind of taking it away from them. You're going, what am I going to watch? College football, the most important game of the year, or that?
Yeah.
If you're AJ, how do you agree to this? And I know Andy Ruiz been making some headlines. He's sort of arguing, I need to get paid more if this is going to Saudi Arabia. I'm sorry, Andy, you have no leverage. This is what happens when you face the champion. You sign a deal that says, we're going to do the rematch and the price is set. He's going to make $9 million. It's a great payday. You're not going to argue for more. I don't get outside of the obvious money grab why they're doing this. And it also just looks bad. Why is UFC the only adult in the room? Remember when they pulled out of Saudi Arabia a couple months ago? Remember that in March?
Well, the Endeavor guys did, but they're going back to UAE, which has, I believe, their Abu Dhabi anyway. They're having their own issues. So
it seems fairly shameless, and it seems like your biggest asset if you're DAZN. Now, they don't have Anthony Joshua exclusively under contract like they do Canelo Alvarez, but he's their biggest, arguably their second biggest asset besides Canelo. Don't you want to protect this guy?
Yeah, and don't you? I mean, what happened to the whole thing of like, let's make Joshua a big deal in the United States? I mean, with one fight, the one that didn't go well, and now you're abandoning it, or at least for the foreseeable future, it's not coming back, or we don't know what the plan is with that. So this whole idea of turning him into some kind of, again, to your point, you can put it in the UK and it's great, but this is supposed to be the next big heavyweight hope. This was supposed to be his introduction to the Big Apple. They were going to rebuild off of that, and now you're abandoning. And I would have understood if they had gone back to the UK for the reasons aforementioned. I'm just sort of pointing out here, there's no overture whatsoever to the U.S. market on this one, other than, oh, by the way, if you're subscribing, catch it at 3 in the afternoon, like you would get Klitschko at 4 p.m. or so. And again, HBO would air those, but it wasn't like a full-throated effort. Other reason for those stories. Here's the one that sort of gets to me. It's like you've got UFC going to Abu Dhabi. You've got this fight going on. You've got WWE doing their issues with the Saudi government. And I saw John Nash on Twitter make a point. He was like, look, dude, people who make money off CTE don't care about human rights. You've even got the next World Cup, which people have to ask themselves very clearly if that's something they're going to support. I don't know if you followed the story at all. First of all, there's some suggestions that the World Cup ended up in 2022 in Qatar.
Qatar, yeah.
Qatar, yes. I say Qatar for the donks. But it's
We
Uruguay.
try to pronounce things on this show.
I used to live in Qatar. No need, my friend. Grew up in Doha. Okay. Point being is this. They gotta get them off my track now, goddammit. The point being is when you look at the human rights abuses, it's not, these people don't invest in these considerations the same way. And so it asks you, like, well, what is the right answer in this modern economy? Do you want to go and try to open up these parts of the world by introducing them to westernized forms of entertainment and sensibilities? I can buy that. On the other hand, I'm always sort of struck by what John McEnroe did. John McEnroe, at the height of apartheid in South Africa, was offered, this is back in the 80s or so, was offered $1 million at the time, which at the time is an extraordinary amount of money, to go compete for, I think it was even an exhibition match, and he said no.
Yeah, he ain't going to play Sun City, right?
So here's the thing. It's like, on the one hand, I had Israel Adesanya on my show because he just did a tour through Saudi Arabia, and I asked him this very same thing. And he takes the former view, which is, look, man, these parts of the world are not going to open if you don't get in there and open them up. But do we really think that's what Eddie Hearn is doing? Is some mission for democracy?
No,
and
it's a money grab. And look, I don't mind stealing bread from the mouth of decadence. Come on. All right, but here's the point. I'm not even here to argue we shouldn't go to Saudi Arabia because this and that.
Why? It's a perfectly reasonable consideration.
I'm here more to argue, why are you doing this if you're DAZN when you're trying to hit a certain market? I mean, they had a press conference this morning without the fighters. It was Eddie Hearn and a representative from Saudi Arabia. Jake Donovan, a boxing writer on Twitter, basically said it looked like a timeshare presentation. It just looks bad.
Yeah.
It looks ultimately shameless, and I think you're watering down and moving from an opportunity to continue this heavyweight momentum.
Oh.
Look, the sport gets crossover fans through the heavyweight division.
Yeah.
It's always been the gateway drug. And now you're just kind of cashing in this one. It's typical boxing.
Okay.
Taking away a piece of the pie rather than having the potential to share it with everyone and make the whole sport.
Okay, but I don't want to diminish this part of the conversation about the moral implications here. And again, people think because the answers are difficult that therefore not worth pursuing. The most important questions in life don't have simple answers. The most important questions in life actually have really difficult ones, and they're worth trying to work through. The point I was trying to make about Qatar was this. The stadiums required for the World Cup in 2022 could only be built on what is basically the modern equivalent of slavery, and dozens of imported workers from South Asian countries have died trying to make these stadiums. If you watch the World Cup in 2022, and many of us probably will, I don't know how I feel about it, you're watching things that, the amount of human suffering that had to go in to make that possible is extraordinary. And so, dude, these questions are relevant. These questions are relevant as a consumer. What role do you play in facilitating this? And also, you know this too, because this is true on the MMA side of things, forget just boxing for a moment. Combat sports, and I would include in this particular case pro wrestling, they attract a certain kind of person, often normal. They also attract another kind of person who has a real fluid, if not sometimes bankrupt morality.
Yeah, I was really going to question your often normal.
Hold on,
comment.
there are normal people, and the normal ones get co-opted all the time. And I don't know when you're supposed to draw the line. Maybe this actually isn't the one where you're supposed to draw the line. I'm not suggesting that it is, but rather, I don't think that the predominant concern here is about DAZN. To me, the predominant concern here is this something we should be supporting?
Yeah, and if you're a fan and or journalist and you were excited about the potential of going to this fight, you're gonna go now?
I don't know.
No.
By the way, this is a legitimate question. If let's say you're a female journalist, are you allowed to go cover this thing?
No. So there's much deeper hooks to this and branches. You're right in terms of the social justice of it. But look, if you're Anthony Joshua again,
I wish you wouldn't use that term. It's not a social justice issue. It's a basic decency issue.
Okay.
It's a basic decency issue. That's a politically loaded term that's going to steer the conversation in a wrong direction. It's just it's a question of like what kind of thing are you going to tolerate and be a part of? That's it, right? Pretty fair, I think.
Yeah.
Anyway, they're going to do it. They're going to make a boatload of cash, and we're probably going to watch because we're losers.